Welcome back to the Fanspeak Network and another strategy session from your favorite siblings. That's right. Today we are talking about eliminator strategy. You know, it's 70% full, Steve, but now is the time to really be drafting eliminator now that we have training camp news. Preseason is now in full swing. And, you know, here in the month of August, it may get filled in the next few weeks, but this is the time everybody, you know, will be finishing out this tournament, and a good time to finish out the tournament because you have, you know, the key is in eliminator is you got to win week 1, 6 out of 12, and then it's a head to head the rest of the way. Yep. And, you know, you really just, it's a kind of a floor, you know, meet ceiling kind of tournament. You need that floor. You cannot, you know, have super low scores at really any of the positions. And so you need to make sure you're moving on. That's the name of the game. You finished it, you're made it to the Eliminator Finals, different structure, but you made it to the Eliminator Finals. What were some of your keys to your Eliminators Finals team last year?
Well, that, you know, you want balance is, I think, so key. And we'll talk about that more shortly. Understanding bye weeks. Last year was more important because you got more teams through till the bye weeks. But you do have to factor in bye weeks, particularly early bye weeks. So balance and build structure, I think, are important. Also, is the types of players. Like certain players who are these spike week guys, it's great. But, you know, if a guy has a 35-point game, that means a lot in regular season or can mean a lot in a pod of 12 or more people in like a BBM playoffs. But in a head-to-head, not only is that not as important, but then that next week when he only has 5 points, he is adding nothing to your team. So a guy who is getting 16 points each of those weeks is far better for you than the guy who gets 30 points one week, 5 points the next week.
Right. Yeah. And so again, it is 6 out of 12 week 1, and then it is essentially a head-to-head the rest of the way. It has been very popular for Total ROI. Steve wrote an article we'll pull over in a minute, kind of went through the pros and cons of it. Again, the kind of, you know, we liked the style last year better. This is certainly fun for sweat equity, for, you know, chatting with, you know, who you may be facing head-to-head on Twitter or on YouTube and that kind of stuff. Definitely very fun equity for sure. But if you're looking for a positive ROI kind of contest, this is probably not it. This is, you know, fun bucks, you know, and that's how we were looking at it. But if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And we're going to do it to give us the best chance to have that fun equity, that sweat equity week to week. So again, you got to make it be in the top half of the pod the first week and then head to head. And so we'll go through what we feel are the key strategies to this contest, because again, this is a great time to draft it. You know, if you've been having fun throughout the summer, great. But now, you know, if you drafted some of these guys like a Mason Taylor or a Khalil Shakir, who, by the way, eliminator ass pick because he is a, you know, kind of safe floor 6 for 70 type guy. But now, you know, probably not going to be there week 1. So this is a great time to draft it because you do not want to have dead roster spots earlier in the year. Just like you don't want to have dead roster spots for your playoff pod teams, you know, to compete and give yourself the best chance in the playoff format best ball. This, you really don't want to take a dead roster spots, especially early in the season. So now's a great time to draft it. So let's get into it. Steve, you wrote an article on Fanspeak Substack, link in the description of the show, $34.99 for an entire year, 3 articles a week, plus rankings on all the different formats from Steve and I, including this contest. Steve has eliminator rankings up and updated 2 or 3 times a week because that's how often we now do ranking updates, and we update them for all the things. So let's get into it first. Build structure. What are your key build structures to the eliminator contest?
Yeah, so this is what I talk about balance, like, you know, BBMs, other types of tournaments. I think you can get more unique and mix it up more, but pretty much every one of my builds is going to be 3-5-7-3 or 3-6-7-2. I think it's possible like a 3-5-8-2 can work as well, but you know, I really am sticking to just those 3 build structures. I'm not going to do 2 quarterback builds in the eliminator. I think you end up, even if it's 2 really good ones, I think you're hurting yourself by doing that.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And, you know, you just wrote an article that we could now maybe consider Russ, even Flacco in best ball, certainly an eliminator. I mean, you know, like you're building a 1 of 3 quarterback team, help you in those early weeks. Because to scroll up first before we get into this, our guy Candyman by the way, in the final four of Best Ball Jeopardy, ran the odds of this tournament. And at the field advance rate, you lose 75. If you max entried, you'd lose 75 teams by week 2. And then he goes through the percent chance. So by the time they start paying out money, basically by the time they start paying out money, 6% of the field
you get 12.5% will get money.
Oh, okay. Okay. 12.5. Sorry.
By the time you get to bye weeks, there's only 6.2% of the field left.
Okay. Right. So week 4, and 12% make money, can make money in this contest. And then it goes up incrementally each week, obviously. But yeah, you're down to 6.2% of the field week 5. And as you can see, by, week 7 and 8, where you really can start making more money, that you're down to less than 1%. Basically, that's why it's harder than it sounds.
The key, like he talks about, like what your expected rate would be max entries, and you see 150 to 75 to 37.5. The point is, by week 9, you are not expected to have a team. You're right. You are lucky if you have one team available, and that's on a max entry build. And that's like the number one key is whether you're doing 10 teams, 100 teams, 150, you need to be above 50%, especially early on.
Yeah.
Sure. Then you need a team to get really lucky and just keep riding.
Yeah.
But the best chance to get there is if you, instead of, being 50-50 week 1 and week 2, if you're like 75% those weeks. So like you really want to shoot for that. And that's why build structure and caring about like early injuries or people being suspended matters so much in this.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go back to the strategy. So build structure, you're saying 3573, 3672, 3582 are your common build structures, always 3 quarterbacks. Anything else about the build structure? You talk about 0 RB is not, if you're a 0 RB bro or gal, this probably is not the contest for you, similar to marathon. Hope there's not a rash of running back injuries, but you would need an absolute, weird run out basically for, basically that's how 0 RB hits, obviously, in the playoff pods. But marathon and eliminator is not for 0 RB because you need those projectable volume. You need at least 2 to 3 projectable volume running backs. And ideally you're building probably 3 or 4 projectable volume running backs. Is that correct?
Yeah. Again, consistency is so key in those 0 RB teams. You're fine. Last year, for instance, like Chase Brown, the first like 4 or 5 weeks did basically nothing. He might have averaged 7 points a game those weeks, but he smashed down the stretch. So those 25-point games that he has really balances you out. That doesn't matter. Your team's eliminated by the time you get to the time where he's hitting 25 points or, Chuba or Bucky or all these other guys are hitting that. And, so that really becomes key in this format, is to make sure you have guys who can be getting me 10, 15, 20, ideally 20 points, but even just 15 points a week by your 2 starting running backs is so key in this format.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's scroll down here. Next you talk about players to prioritize. Who are the players you're prioritize or, deprioritizing?
So first I start out and this was some players, like when I wrote this, Diggs, there was some question if he'd be injured to start the year. Obviously, he sounds to be in a much better situation now. But like Godwin and Rashee Rice, who's to be suspended, also dealing with multiple injuries, and Chris Godwin, who, even if he plays week 1, probably isn't going to be anywhere near his full self. And so you have to ding those guys. And like Meg said, guys who just got hurt, like Shakir, Anthony Richardson in the first preseason game, stuff like that. These guys are clearly, Joe Mixon, maybe Joe Mixon ends up being fine for a BBM team, but in a format like this, by the time he gets there, you could be totally drawing dead. And so, for instance, like maybe in like a BBM, you move Godwin down, you can get him in the 180s now, but in this, he should probably be going pick 100. Like you need to move him down even more if you do take that kind of guy.
Oh, like you're saying you can get Godwin in the 80s and like a BBM, but you need him to be like pick 100 here.
Yeah, if not later. And then
it's not to say you can never draft those guys. It's just their number has to make sense, and the rest of your room is going to have to cover them not being there week 1, 2, 3, however long they're either suspended or coming back from injury. So you have to deprioritize those guys. You're also dinging rookies a little bit too, obviously.
Yeah, most rookies we're expecting, the post-bye rookie bump. We hear that all the time. And really, it's just second half of the year, late in the year. You had a few rookies last year, like Neighbors did pretty well early on.
Yeah.
But the other ones, BTJ, Xavier Worthy, Lad McConkey, they were so much better down the stretch. And these were top 10 receivers. So, but they're not adding a lot. If you do play them, like ideally you're getting them at a lower ADP. Ideally, you're balancing your team with some guys who can give you some consistent scores early on. So it's just, you need to really be cognizant of that. Like I like, Travis Hunter and Matthew Golden, but they take a hit in this format because they might not start out hot early. And then the other thing about types of players is spike week versus consistency.
Yes.
Talked about a little before, but I use the example here of Jacoby Myers versus Jaden Reed. Last year, Jacoby Myers in 9 of his 15 games had 10 plus fantasy points. He only had one game over 20 points. He goes at the time 7 spots ahead of Jaden Reed. It's probably roughly around the same now. But Jaden Reed, who had just 6 10 plus point games in 17 weeks. So, yes, Jaden Reed had like 2 30-ish point games, but again, those aren't balancing out. Like Reed might have outscored Myers. I think is very close. But last year, Myers was clearly the better player for this kind of format.
Right. Yeah. And people joke in the industry, eliminator ass pick and stuff like that. That's what's kind of crazy is if you were drafting Shakir, he was an eliminator ass pick. But now he's detrimental to your eliminator teams because he's not going to be out there early. Okay. Schedule bye week considerations, whether it's obviously matchups, weather concerns, or obviously then once you hit into bye weeks, talk about how you're handling that.
Yeah. So instead of weeks 15 through 17, we're focused on early weeks. Really, I'd say through the first 5 weeks, because you get money in week 4 and then week 5.
The bye week start
keeps going up. And like I said, you really want to have your advance rate above that 50% through those first 4 or 5 weeks. If you have any hope of getting, at least one team through to kind of the good money. And I think, and this is more low past week 5, but like international games can be key. Like you don't want to have a lot of players in international games because historically international scoring has been lower. And there is some of that in the first 5 weeks, but mainly that's more middle of the season.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about snow, but maybe some hot weather games, that can be a factor. I think that's a minor thing, but that's something just to keep in mind. And then the big thing is, early buys like week 5, week 6, in particular week 7. I mean, 2 of the elite quarterbacks, top 2 elite quarterbacks, Allen and Lamar, both have that same week 7 buy. So this is why you want 3 quarterbacks, because if you're taking them, you've made a team through 6 weeks, you don't want to get to week 7 and just be drawing dead because you're relying solely on this elite stud quarterback.
Yeah, because if you have one other quarterback, giving yourself 2 other outs that let's say week 7, say you build a Lamar team and you have 2 other outs, that probably just gives you a better chance to move on than having just 1 out. Maybe you run pure with it, but we're trying to set ourselves up for success. Again, you're still going to need luck in this contest, just like we need luck in anything. But this is the contest, especially. You're going to have to run pure no matter what, but we're doing everything we can to give ourselves the best recipe for success.
Mm-hmm. And another example, and this is kind of with the suspended player earlier, but Jordan Addison, who's now it's official suspended the first 3 weeks, then he's a week 6 bye. So through the first 6 games, he's not going to be there for 4 of the 6 games. So what does that do to his ADP? I mean, that should be considered, essentially.
Like where do you have him now in your eliminator ranking?
I'd have to double check, but I think in like the 120s, 130. I really docked him because that's a massive amount of time early on. So he should not be going as your 3rd or 4th receiver. He should be your 6th receiver, 5th or 6th receiver.
No, that makes a ton of sense, obviously.
And
anything else about, and then obviously not overlapping too many bye weeks.
Yeah. And it's not just, it's definitely a position, like for instance, Bijan and Josh Jacobs, Caleb Johnson, that's 3 early running backs who have that bye, plus the Chicago guys. But it's also total team. Like you don't want to have, Bijan and DK Metcalf and Colson Loveland, and then you're missing like 3 key players week 5. even though it's only one at each position, that can still be significant. Plus, say a quarterback, so that could be a significant amount of your team off in a given week. And it can get tougher. Like a week 8 has 6 teams on bye, but early on, I want to get my teams advanced as far as possible. Then it gets so much thinner. So your chances of facing another really good team, lessen as you go on more and more. So to me, my key for the number of teams I'm doing is to get as many through early as possible.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, just watching those total bye weeks at a particular position or just in total, like you don't want to have too many of one particular bye week, or else you're just setting yourself up to fail. Positional breakdowns, you're just talking about, consistency, any other things that stand out at a certain position. We already talked about the zero RB versus, wanting to at least double anchor RB kind of.
Yeah. And so this is the thing, like true contingent value running backs have way less value in this format because they're not going to hit your lineup without an injury. Also, like quarterbacks, for instance, a guy like Aaron Rodgers last year, I think he had 11 games of 15 or more points. So it gives you a really good floor in this kind of contest. So as like a third quarterback, he's a great option for you.
I've loved Rodgers as a third quarter. I'm only doing like 25 of these, but and a lot will end up being on stream here in August too. But like I'm doing a lot of Aaron Rodgers. By the way, week 1, nobody likes a good revenge game more than Aaron Rodgers. Steelers versus Jets, and then of course just the floor, that you talked about. Yeah.
And so the final thing, like tight ends, that is the position where I would potentially only go to. I think elite tight end takes a little hit. While there can be something said for the more consistency there, it's more just like the opportunity cost. I'd rather have like 2 middle tight ends. I wouldn't really go for too much late tight end, maybe one late, but not super late, because again, the guys last year, and even some guys who hit late, like Tyler Conklin, Chigakonkwo, Jawan Johnson, they were kind of good down the stretch, but they were not good early in the year. They were not good throughout. They're very inconsistent type plays.
Yeah, I think I would lean to like that middle range a lot, like the Tyler Warren, Jake Ferguson, something like
Mark
that.
Andrews, Evan Ingram, those kind of guys.
Yeah, that middle section seems like a sweet spot for tight end. So kind of obviously 3 quarterbacks no matter what, kind of in summary for our positional things, definitely like 3 at minimum projectable volume running backs, but a strong stable of projectable volume running backs, probably some kind of double anchor, and then making sure there's projectable volume at that 3rd and 4th running back ideally. And then, receiver really considering the floor as much as the ceiling, and tight end. That middle range might be a sweet spot. I mean, I think those are kind of like the keys for each of us at the positions. And then in total, you're docking certain players, injury, rookies, suspension, all that. And then, those guys that have a safer floor, you're definitely boosting them up, obviously. And that's what the kind of the name of the game to this, build structurally sound teams that make sense, take account. And if you use Best Ball Overlay, code Fanspeak 25% off. Obviously you see us use them on Best Ball Overlay on streams to help us manage our portfolios, see correlations and everything, but you can set it so you can see the playoff, see the first few weeks as opposed to the playoff schedule. So when we look at weeks 15, 16, 17, you can look at weeks 1, 2, 3, kind of see there's certain teams like I believe the Dolphins, Colts, Jaguars, that have some really nice matchups. So like maybe you want to target those teams a little more. Because again, having, like Steve said, I think that's another really good thing to keep in your head is if you're getting out of the first week way over 50%, then you're giving yourself a much better chance down the line. If you're getting way lower than 50%, you probably would need to just run absolutely pure, no matter how many. So no matter how many entries, whether you want to do, 5, 10, 25, 50, or max it, whatever you want to do, you should be giving yourself your best chance. Because if you have, like Steve said, more like a 60, 70% advance rate in week 1 and 2, then you're setting yourself up to really try to shoot for having some fun sweats and some, chance at some money. So I think those are good summary. I think we hit all the high points of your article. Again, link in the description for the Best Ball subscription, Substack subscription, $34.99 for an entire year. A lot more to come because once Best Ball season ends, we'll be going right into DFS Battle Royale sports betting season in season. So I think we covered it, but it is in there. If you are a Substack sub, check that out. Of course, hit this like button if you're watching this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the Fanspeak Network. Any final thoughts, Steve, on the Eliminator contest or in general?
No, like you said, it's a contest to have fun with. But I do think it's important to keep in mind like what the structure is, how to build it right, because it's just vastly different than BBM and even the other ones like marathon and sprint as well. So, but I think if you do build with the right mindset and the right types of picks, I think you can do a good job of improving your advance rate and ending up making this a more profitable contest.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fun. Again, we also have strategy shows under the Best Ball tab for Superflex, for Marathon, now Eliminator, and we will have a sprint one up next week as well, covering all the different formats on Underdog as we round out Best Ball summer. So for Steve, I'm Meg, and we will see you next time.